as you can imagine, it's big, so the rug is pretty empty without it. But anyway, I've been in touch with Lin. He still teaches in San Francisco. He splits his time between Shanghai and San Francisco, and he teaches at City College. And I was able to get in touch with him and told him this is going to be in the show. So then he sent me photographs of the other Maryland series that he did in the 90s before he went in a very different direction. Very humble man, he's just a wonderful person. It was really nice to reconnect with him as we were getting to the show. So obviously we're standing in the Maryland wind. And I want to point out a few things. Ben Steele, who has several pieces in the show. And Ben actually did a nice Zoom with Brian, and it's available to listen to. It's a really nice talk that Ben gives about his art. Because his work is really parody in the sense of parody art that's not so much critical, but more of an homage to the original artist. So he takes objects that are part of his life and incorporates them into his paintings. He does a lot of stuff referencing everyone from Vermeer to obviously the Warhol kid. A couple of things I want to point out here is obviously this is that glamorous side of depicted here. Obviously in retrospect there was a lot of exploitation of them, and there was a certain amount of sadness to her in her life, which I think were captured very well in these two paintings. Ryan Singer is a young Navajo artist in Albuquerque, and this was an early painting that he did. That there was an article in one of the throwaway papers in Albuquerque that featured this painting. And so I got in touch with Ryan, and we became friends out of our association of my supporting his work in the early years, and now he's quite successful. But what I love about this is it's not exactly the glamorous Maryland. The sadness of her, I think, comes through this painting, but it's parody because he put a Navajo squash blossom necklace around her and wrapped her in a Pendleton blanket, and yet it's still a very dignified piece of work. And this one, which kind of is an homage to Chuck Close, again, I think captures some of the sadness of the and I think that's what makes that such a powerful piece for me. Bill Gladstone. And here, obviously, the iconic Andy Warhol Maryland, the museum guard becomes Andy, and then his Brillo box and Campbell soup can. And the artist himself kind of autobiographically is depicted as the thinker. And that's very typical of a lot of the Phil Gladstones that are in the show primarily are from his museum series, where he would depict something going on in the museum at night, and there's always a young man and the museum guard that take various forms, but it's usually a mashup of several artists' work in films. This is another, like the Karen Jurek that I referred to. Here we have a man admiring the Marylands, so we're observing him observing art. And this, of course, is Andy Warhol that started a lot of this.
A lot of people don't know that the state of New Mexico has one of the governors here. Will of Maryland.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I did not know.
Yeah.
This piece over here by Sebastian Villano, he lives in Slovakia. No, I'm sorry, Romania. I bought it from an online auction. But what I like about this piece is he took a famous painting by Degas of it was called the Absinthe Drinkers. And when it first appeared in Paris in 1876, the critics hated it. They thought it was very debased, and they didn't like it for many, many years. Similarly, Picasso's Les Demoiselles wasn't even shown. He didn't even show the painting when he painted it in 1907 until 1916, because he correctly realized people weren't ready for it. And even when he showed it in 1916, it still had a lot of critics until a few years later in the post-World War I era, people embraced Cubism, and maybe that reflected the fractious nature of the world at that time. So anyway, I love that aspect of it, is he put together two paintings that were just panned by the critics when they came out.
Is that also a reference to the fruit?
Yeah, that's actually from the original.
Oh, the
Demoiselle.
label.
He just
Yeah,
took it
he
out
took
and
it
put
out.
it in the foreground.
Got it.
And then Ben Steele again, borrowing from art history, he took Les Demoiselles and put it on a beer bottle, Picasso Porter. And that's pretty typical of Ben's work. It's, you get the joke, and there's not a lot otherwise behind it, I don't think. I mean, I really love it, and it's fun and it's well done. But ultimately, it's not thought-provoking.
Are you sure?
Beyond.
Are you sure?
Okay, challenge me.
Well, no,
I
because
mean-
it is taking something contemporary, and by putting it on a beer bottle, it changes the trope, the use of the image of the painting.
Yeah.
So it completely displaces the image of Picasso's painting, and it becomes a commercial.
Okay,
Yeah. So I think it has a bit more.
okay.
You know, and art becomes commercial, blah,
Right,
you know,
right.
we can,
Well,
we
in
can
fact,
riff on.
we can, well, and it even gets circular at a point.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little later, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
really nice.
And it is, and
It is a
I
really nice
love it.
painting.
I love the blue background is just so
Yeah,
gorgeous.
perfect, yeah.
It's fun that you have so many of the same painting being riffed on by different artists.
The young Italian artist Luana Montoni, who did this as an homage to Amedeo Modigliani. I love this piece because, you know, he had a tragically short life, and he painted his wife Jean many times, and when he died, Jean was so despondent that 2 days afterwards she threw herself off the 6th-floor balcony and died with their unborn child.
Oh, Lord.
And Luana even included a little homage to the unborn child over here. And so when I saw this piece, first of all, I love the brilliant colors that she uses, and she talks about Romer Brito as an influence just because of his vibrant color, and so that's a real influence for her. So I love it because I think it's well painted, but there's so much depth of feeling that she put into this piece. Now this is kind of, we're entering the Philip Gladstone wing. Philip is represented more so than any other artist in the show. We have a huge collection of his work, and much of it is riffing on well-known paintings, but doing some really fun details along the way. Like this one, you know, you can see how closely he redoes the original David Hockney painting. Here now, the museum guard becomes David Hockney himself. He's got little yellow Crocs on, and there's a little yellow ducky that's in the pool. And, no, I'm sorry, he's not the museum guard. What the title is while secretly hiding away in the museum after closing, Hockney has a flash of inspiration, requires a model, and the night guard volunteers. So you can see that the guard's uniform is laying here,
Right,
and
that's
he's
the guard.
upside down, and Hockney's creating this other well-known painting of his. So when I saw this piece, I was just gaga because, one, I love David Hockney, but I love Phil's imagination and what he does with riffing on more famous works of art. So, painting, but I think the breadth of paintings that Phil uses for his inspiration here is pretty impressive. This one I do want to point out though, because Yves Klein was another French artist who tragically died in his 30s, but he was very, very productive artist, and he did a series of paintings where Yves Klein blue became a famous color. I mean, he made this blue famous enough that it has his name on it now. So you can actually order Yves Klein blue. In any event, he painted these nude women with the blue, and then they would press themselves against canvases. And he also did a series of canvases where he would light it on fire and then he would stop that. And so Phil kind of combined that together in this piece. So now the museum guard, don't know why he's not wearing his uniform, but it's on fire here. And but it really captures. There are, you can find online some videos of Yves Klein's work with the nude paintings and the stuff on fire. And I've been a big fan of him, so when I saw this painting that Phil did, it was like, oh yeah, that's got to be in the collection. This one is an homage to Banksy, which also includes Keith Haring's dog and Mickey Mouse. Phil's father was an illustrator for Disney, and so you'll see a lot of Disney references in his work as well. This painting, for me, is probably the most emotional one. Picasso did a painting to protest the massacre of women and children in Korea in 1951. And the soldiers were kind of like this, aiming their rifles at the women and children. It's an equally powerful painting to Guernica, if you haven't seen it. It's amazing. So he took the soldiers out of the painting, and this one he calls Routing of the Poets. There's a Mark Rothko painting, and these figures are emerging from the painting. And with the title Routing of the Poets, it harked back for me to Federico Garcia Lorca being taken out by the fascisti and shot. And the somberness of the colors in the Mark Rothko just really reinforced that for me. I told the artist this recently because as we were getting ready to do the show and putting things together, I looked at it in the context of the kind of geopolitical turmoil that we're in right now, and it harkened back to the Spanish Civil War for me. So I told the artist that, and it inspired him to do another kind of related piece. Phil also really loves, as you'll see with some of the other pieces, his Keith Haring homage. This, in fact, was the tree of life that Keith had done. And he has Keith painted up as Keith was in that famous Annie Leibovitz photograph that you've all seen. And so he frequently has that. And he did a series of what he called tub paintings of people in bathtubs, and then just really went to town on this one. with the wallpaper with the herring figures, and the title's kind of hilarious. Mr. Herring contemplates the day's news while his bath grows cold and his dog becomes alarmed. This one also is, what I love about it is just the genius of it, where he has a famous Thomas Eakins paintings of the bathers. They're emerging from the painting, and one of them is diving through the floor to the American wing where the Roy Lichtenstein photo is. And I think he just really pulled off something with this one that's just so amazing to me.
Guard.
Yes, exactly. The guard is busy on the phone doing something. And so I just was so enthralled with this, where you can even see the I-beams between floors and he's diving through. It's just, so that you can kind of see why Phil's stuff is kind of a big part of his show. So, but how are we doing on time?
2:15.
Okay, so I'll leave you to looking at the other Gladstone so we can talk about some of the other pieces.
The Gladstone also seems like uses the themes of the checkerboard
Yes.
flooring.
He did.
Seems like it's
he
graphic.
Exactly. But it really worked well because of this homage to Bridget Riley, who was kind of the founder of pop art or optical art. This one is just
Terry posted, sent the brunch group. Oh. And that's
French artist who resides in Belgium. He's a very prolific artist and doesn't even do these anymore. He did them for a while, but I love how he, again, they're more of an homage, but by focusing on the face and blocking out everything else, it just gives you a different experience of the famous artworks. Leo Manelli, this is a lithograph of one of his paintings, but he's a young Italian who primarily borrows from more famous 19th century paintings, but then interjects 20th and 21st century art. So, you know, it's based on one of these paintings where the women would be studying sculpture and contemporary stuff, and he puts in Basquiat and Warhol and Herring to create a really humorous piece. He's done a lot of these. They're very large paintings and they're collected all over the world. But I was able to find a lithograph to illustrate what he's doing. Let's see. By Willem van Perush. He is from the Netherlands and takes typically Renaissance and Baroque famous paintings and faithfully reproduces the figure, but then puts him in a different background to give a more contemporary feel to the work. They're very skilled because he's a very good draftsman, but it gives you, again, a more immediate experience of a Renaissance painting. Andrea Bonatti, another Italian. He lives not far from Florence, so he kind of grew up with a lot of famous Italian art. So he takes a lot of inspiration from Caravaggio and other contemporaries. And there's a famous Bacchus that Caravaggio did that he riffs on in this, and he calls it his acid version, because it doesn't have the typical chiaroscuro that you see and love about Caravaggio. He calls this Bacco 0.7, as opposed to like 2.0, that would be an improvement because you can't improve on Caravaggio. So he's a very funny guy, and does some amazing takeoffs of some well-known Renaissance art. This Birth of Venus figure and put her in a tropical garden to give a very contemporary feel. And please feel free to ask any questions along the way. This painting by Valery Stratiuk, he's a Ukrainian who now lives in Slovakia. I love how he takes an almost Renaissance rendering of the young man. He's almost worshiping this painting from the Dutch Golden Age. And then in the background, you have a contemporary Damien Hirst spot painting. So you cover the Renaissance to the Dutch Golden Age to 21st century art all in this. He called this Talking About Art. It's a series that he's doing about discussion of art and art history. It's one of my favorite pieces in the show.
That's
Yeah.
a cool
Gorgeous.
painting.
What's that?
That's a very cool, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites in the show. And
Is the Dutch Golden Age painting, is that one of the Lawrence's?
it might be.
Yeah.
It might be. Yeah.
What it was.
Yeah.
Great.
But yeah, in fact, it was a last-minute substitute, so I didn't have time to get a frame for the show. But anyway, it's just an amazing example of what some European artists are doing right now in terms of homage to the past and creating something very 21st century.
Speaking of framing, how did you decide what type of frame to use? Coloration.
To paint. So he's borrowed from Vermeer a lot.
Spin
So he
steel.
put the milkmaid on a milk carton. And I don't know, I just love it.
Yeah.
And this one, he really went out. So you have John Singer Sargent's Madam X on the tall board, Marilyn, of course, and then Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, all in one painting. And this is pretty typical of the work that Ben does.
What's its title?
The title is Gorgeous, so it's gorgeous. Yes, good to point that out. Again, that's part of the parody of it, I think. So, this is American Claire Hartman. Claire loves dogs. She used her own Jack Russell as the model for these two paintings. And sometimes when she'll sell dog paintings to raise money for her local animal shelter. So she's amazing. But I love these pieces, one, because I loved the Frida Kahlo that this one is based, and of course Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring. And this one just still makes me laugh every time I look at it, because what's so weird about a dog being dressed up this way? You know what I mean? It's like, it's totally natural, and I just, it just makes me smile every time I see it.
But she completely got the gaze.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And similar
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
she got the gaze.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right. These guys. Francis Bacon, this is a lithograph from one of his paintings that he did of his lover, George Dyer. And this one is called George Dyer Talking. So, Alexander Babyshev, this Ukrainian artist who I adore for his brilliantly colored paintings. So he recreates the room, represents the figure more typically representational than the abstract way that Bacon did. But this one is called George Dyer Talking, and this is Unknown Man Keeping the Silence. For the sake of time, I'm just going to point out two things. Potato with Picasso and Melon with Mondrian were probably really the first paintings in the collection of parody art. I bought these from Brian in one of his open studios in Oakland, California, back in the late 80s. So the Potato with Picasso he had done actually in the 70s, and this one was fairly new. You know, it's parody in the sense that he's borrowing from a part of a Mondrian, and then does this very highly realistically painted melon. And same thing here, that's not an actual Picasso, but it's in the style of Picasso to create his Potato with Picasso. I guess he liked alliteration. So, and then there's a few more of Ben Steele's smaller works, Van Gogh crayons. Shitting his promote Ben Steele Company. And Monk Motel. I'm not sure I'd want to stay there, but it makes for a lovely
But
little
it's a screen.
And this guy, in a true Andy Warhol manner, used Joe Camel from the 1990s cigarette ads and put it with Roy Lichtenstein. Okay, I'm probably gonna just wrap up with a couple more things. Guernica is one of the most profound paintings of the 20th century, one could argue. Seeing it in person, it is so long, and it's only in one room in the museum in Madrid. It's a very profound experience, soft lighting, and when you stand in front of it, you really see the genius of Picasso in capturing the horrors of war. And so anyway, it's always been a favorite of mine. And what's kind of interesting about these two paintings, just in general, is they're both the same size. They were done by two different artists, neither of whom knew the other, in the same year, 2012. And Michael Griesgraber has since passed, but he did a lot of parody paintings. He became known for painting things with Starbucks logo in them. So he used to go to a Starbucks in his neighborhood in Milwaukee, Minnesota, and he did one of those paintings and put a Starbucks cup in the hands of a person in the famous painting. And it was hanging in the Starbucks, and he comes back to the Starbucks the next day and the painting's gone. And they sold it. So he was like, wow, you actually got a lot of money for this. So he started doing a lot of those, and he ended up, I knew it was the same size of the one that Phil Gladstone had done as a commission for us. You know, looking at this, and again, Phil likes to also use contemporary culture things. So you have the Tin Man, who probably at this point wishes that he didn't have a heart. He's heartbroken. The parrot probably is Phil's, because he actually has a parrot as a pet that he's had for 20 years. And I like how it's kind of autobiographical, where the artist himself is emerging from the painting. And then the Picasso reference and the Roy Lichtenstein with the verses. So there's a lot that he has going on here, and the exit sign is peace. The middle piece, and you can see it from here, the weeping mother with her dead child in her hands. So Arthur Lopez is a northern New Mexico santero who paints religious things. So he took the weeping mother and child and turned it into a pieta. It's, you know, amazing that he captures the horror of that